When Emma first discovered she was pregnant, she could hardly believe it. After years of trying, of doctor visits and heartbreaks, of sleepless nights wondering if she would ever hold a baby of her own, the two faint pink lines on that small plastic stick seemed almost unreal. She stood in the bathroom in complete silence, the early morning light spilling softly across the tiled floor, her breath caught in her chest. Her hands trembled as she held the test, her reflection in the mirror blurred by tears that welled uncontrollably in her eyes. She whispered, almost afraid to disturb the moment, "It finally happened." For months, Emma had been living between hope and resignation. Her husband, Daniel, always tried to reassure her, "It'll happen when the time is right," but even he had begun to lose faith silently. They had spoken about adoption, about moving on, about accepting a different kind of future. But deep down, Emma couldn't let go of the image that had lived in her heart since she was a child. A baby in her arms, a tiny hand wrapped around her finger, a soft breath against her chest. And now, that dream had finally begun to take shape. She told Daniel that evening, slipping the positive test into a small box tied with a silver ribbon. When he opened it, confusion flickered across his face before it melted into pure astonishment. Then came laughter, loud, unrestrained, filled with disbelief, and tears too. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if afraid she might vanish. "We did it," he kept saying. "We actually did it." From that moment, their home changed. The walls seemed brighter, the air lighter. Every conversation revolved around the baby. Names, colors for the nursery, which lullabies they'd sing. Emma started keeping a journal, recording every detail, from her first wave of nausea to the sound of her heartbeat at the first appointment. She wrote letters to her unborn child, filled with love and wonder, promising to protect, cherish, and guide them through every storm life might bring. The months passed quickly, each one marking a new stage of anticipation. Emma loved feeling the tiny flutters inside her belly, the gentle reminders that there was a life growing within her. Sometimes at night, when Daniel rested his head on her stomach, they would talk softly to the baby. "Hey there, little one," Daniel would say, his voice full of awe. "We can't wait to meet you." And sometimes, as if in response, there would be a faint kick, a tiny nudge as though the baby was answering back. Their doctor, Dr. Harris, was a kind woman in her early 50s with a calm, reassuring presence. Every appointment brought smiles and laughter. "Everything looks perfect," Dr. Harris would say, and Emma would breathe a little easier each time. Her pregnancy seemed textbook. No complications, no signs of concern. Just a healthy, glowing mother-to-be and a baby growing steadily inside her. But life, Emma would soon learn, has a way of weaving surprises into even the most perfect moments. It happened during her 7th-month ultrasound. Emma had gone alone that day. Daniel was away on a short business trip and had promised to call right after the appointment. She sat in the waiting room, her hands resting protectively over her belly, humming softly to herself. When her name was called, she smiled and followed the technician, a young woman named Mia, into the dimly lit room. The gel was cold against her skin, and the rhythmic sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, a sound that always brought Emma to tears. Mia moved the wand slowly, her eyes fixed on the monitor. For a few moments, everything felt normal. Then, suddenly, the technician's expression changed. She leaned in closer, squinting at the screen. Mia murmured, her tone shifting slightly. "I'm just going to take a few extra images, okay?" Emma's heart skipped. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Oh, no, not at all," Mia replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Sometimes the baby moves around a lot and makes it tricky to get clear pictures. Just give me a moment." But as the seconds stretched into minutes, Emma's pulse raced. The technician stepped out to get Dr. Harris, who returned a few minutes later, her expression unreadable but calm. She sat beside Emma and began to look at the screen herself. The silence in the room was deafening. Then, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Harris let out a quiet laugh. "Well," she said softly, turning the monitor so Emma could see, "it looks like you're having a bit more company than you thought." Emma blinked, not understanding at first. "Company?" Dr. Harris pointed at the screen. "You're not carrying one baby," she said gently. "You're carrying two." For a moment, Emma just stared. The words didn't make sense. Two? That couldn't be right. They had seen the baby many times before, heard one heartbeat, felt one set of movements. How could there possibly be two? But there, clear as day, were two small figures, side by side, their tiny hearts beating in perfect rhythm. Tears flooded Emma's eyes as shock and joy collided inside her chest. She covered her mouth, a sob escaping her throat. "Twins?" she whispered. "I'm having twins?" Dr. Harris nodded, smiling warmly. "Congratulations, Emma. You're going to be the mother of twins." In that instant, time seemed to stand still. The world around her blurred, her mind spinning between disbelief and elation. She had prayed for one miracle, and now she was being given two. It felt almost impossible to comprehend. When Daniel called later that afternoon, his voice filled with excitement, she could hardly speak at first. "Is everything okay?" he asked, concern edging into his tone. Emma laughed through her tears. "Everything's more than okay. You're going to be a dad to two babies, Daniel. We're having twins." There was silence on the line, followed by a disbelieving, almost hysterical laugh. "Wait, what? Twins? Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious," she said, crying and laughing all at once. From that day forward, everything doubled. The joy, the preparations, the sleepless nights planning how they would manage. They bought a second crib, a second car seat, double the clothes and diapers. Their small spare room transformed into a sanctuary of soft pastels and tiny blankets, every corner filled with the promise of two new lives soon to arrive. But with the joy came the worries. Twin pregnancies, as Dr. Harris carefully explained, often carried higher risks. Emma's checkups became more frequent, her rest more essential. There were nights when fear crept in. What if something went wrong? What if she couldn't handle two at once? But every time doubt surfaced, Daniel was there to remind her that they would face it all together. When the day of labor finally arrived, it came without warning. A storm was raging outside, thunder shaking the windows as Emma woke in the early hours to a sharp, unmistakable pain. Her contractions were close together, and by the time Daniel rushed her to the hospital, the rain was coming down in sheets. The delivery room was a blur of bright lights and hurried voices. Emma gripped Daniel's hand, her face pale but determined. Hours passed in what felt like minutes, and finally, the first cry filled the room. A strong, piercing wail that made every hardship worth it. The nurse announced, "A beautiful baby girl," and placed the tiny, wriggling infant into Emma's arms. Emma sobbed openly, holding her daughter close, whispering, "You're perfect. You're perfect." But before she could fully take it in, another wave of pain surged through her body. The doctors exchanged knowing looks. There was still another baby coming. Within moments, the room came alive again with urgency and motion, and then a second cry echoed through the air. "A boy!" someone exclaimed. "You've got a little boy, too!" Emma's laughter mixed with tears as Daniel kissed her forehead. Two babies, a girl and a boy. Her heart felt like it might burst from the sheer magnitude of it all. In the quiet that followed, as the storm outside began to fade, Emma held her twins in her arms. The girl, whom they named Lily, slept peacefully, her tiny fingers curled around Emma's thumb. The boy, Noah, squirmed slightly, his eyes already curious about the world around him. In that moment, surrounded by the hum of hospital machines and the scent of newborn skin, Emma realized that every heartbreak, every disappointment, every long night of waiting had led to this. Two tiny souls who had chosen her to be their mother. The following weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and pure, unfiltered love. There were feedings every few hours, moments of exhaustion that pushed Emma and Daniel to their limits, but also countless moments of wonder. Two babies discovering the world together, their eyes following each other, their hands reaching out as if remembering a connection formed long before birth. Sometimes, late at night, Emma would sit in the nursery, both babies asleep in their cribs, the soft glow of the nightlight bathing the room in golden warmth. She would listen to their breathing, a peaceful symphony that reminded her of how far they had come. She would think about that ultrasound, about the shock that had turned to joy, and feel gratitude swell in her heart so deeply that it brought her to tears. From tears of joy to total shock, her journey had been one of faith, resilience, and grace. Life had surprised her in the most extraordinary way, giving her not just what she had longed for, but twice the love, twice the laughter, twice the reason to believe in miracles. Years later, when the twins were old enough to understand, Emma would tell them the story of how she found out about them, the ultrasound, the disbelief, the laughter that followed. She would tell them how their father had cried when he heard the news, how the storm had raged the night they were born, and how the first time she held them both, she knew she would never be the same again. And every time she told the story, Daniel would smile and say, "That was the day our world doubled in size." Because sometimes life doesn't just give you what you ask for, it gives you something far greater, wrapped in surprise and wonder, reminding you that miracles often come when you least expect them. Emma never forgot that, and every night when she tucked Lily and Noah into bed, she would whisper the same words she had written in her journal years before, back when she believed she was talking to just one child. You were worth every tear, every moment of waiting, every silent prayer whispered into the dark. You were worth it all. And then she would smile, remembering the moment everything changed, the moment one baby became two, and feel her heart fill all over again with the same beautiful, overwhelming emotion that had first begun it all, tears of joy.